Began as a tiny diner and petrol station. William Mullen leased the Midway, a tiny Cuba, Missouri cafe, to Aline Earls in the 1930s. Route 66 brought riches to Cuba, and the Midway was ready to capitalize on the traveling public's journey from Chicago to California and beyond. Earls bought Midway Cafe from Mullins to capitalize on the new business. Tea in the 1940s boosted Midway business. Earls added a second level with 24 rooms and 4 baths to the Midway in the 1940s. She kept the cafe open while constructing, exposing customers to plaster and dust. In Marion Clark and Michael Wallace's Route 66 cookbook. Comfort from the Mother Road, Earls recalled. When I decided to add the second floor for sleeping rooms, things were really a mess. She adds, we swung beams over folks' heads and moved tables from one side to the next to accommodate folks, but I never closed. Customers entered through the front windows for months. Fort Wood soldiers and their spouses occupied the new rooms. Salesmen stopped at the Midway on their national tours. The Midway became a bus stop, and Earls now employs 36 people. The restaurant remained open 24/7 under Mrs. Earls's ownership for 38 years. As she never closed the cafe doors, she had no key to offer the new owners in 1972. A fantastic Clark and Wallace anecdote from those years involves several passed-out troops at the counter. A liquor inspector ordered the troops out of the establishment. Friends took the troops to the Mullins lawn next door. After seeing what was occurring, Mrs. Mullins stole the troops' blankets and pillows. She wished someone would do the same for her service-serving sons. Cooks Gertie Forbes and B. Forster were Midway icons. The Midway cooks were former waiters. They were Midway legends and 2 of many personnel that served the public. At one point, the Midway offered 600 dinners daily. Locals of Cuba gathered at the Midway. First jobs, special occasions, after-school hangouts, family meals, meetings, and more took place there. Midway breakups and makeups. Kids danced to jukebox music. Teens visited after football games. The Midway was significant to generations of Cubans. Dan Harris bought the Midway from Mrs. Earls in 1972 and sold it to Junior Beers. Blues star Noel Picard and wife Vivienne acquired the Midway in 1976. To make the Midway successful, the Picards and their children Dan and Annie toiled. Noel Picard's Midway hosted wild game meals for the St. Louis Blues. SLU football players Jim Hart, Dan Deerduff, and Jackie Smith visited the Midway. The family-owned restaurant was popular with locals, and the Midway was still a meeting center even if the upper rooms were empty. The New Year's festivities were legendary. The Midway started to collapse when the Picards sold it. The restaurant industry closed, and small companies moved in. After years of neglect, the Midway is low. Truckloads of rubble were removed when the building was sold. The fire crew started simulating firefighting by dragging hoses through the structure and ascending ladders to the second-story windows. It is reported the new owners will demolish the structure. Walking through the building reveals terrible neglect. A building once full of life and joy is now empty. Photos show it best. Abandoned residence on kilometer 78 of the route between Havana and Pinar del Rio in San Cristobal has been there for over 20 years. People are certain that it stays empty because it is a haunted house, explains National Omnibus Company driver Gilberto Espinosa, who has driven Havana Pinar for over 20 years. It's a good house with a masonry roof, but no one dares live there, says Pinar del Rio resident Carlos Trujillo, who often visits Havana. The abandoned house legend is so widespread in Western Cuba that most people have heard it, notwithstanding its absurdity. This Cuban house has been abandoned for a long time, indicating that many are against it. Housing is a national problem. They say hearing voices and knocking things over at night is cursed. an abandoned residence on kilometer 78 of the route between Havana and Pinar del Rio in San Cristobal, has been there for over 20 years. People are certain that it stays empty because it is a haunted house, explains National Omnibus Company driver Gilberto Espinosa, who has driven Havana Pinar for over 20 years. It's a good house with a masonry roof, but no one dares live there, says Pinar del Rio resident Carlos Trujillo, who often visits Havana. The abandoned house legend is so widespread in western Cuba that most people have heard it, notwithstanding its absurdity. It transcends travelogue. A farmer at kilometer 78 on the other side of the expressway, Lazaro Abreu, claims, "They say that you can see lights, that the beds move, and that the pans fall down." An abandoned, physically sound, enormous house seems suspicious, even without superstitions, particularly in a location where hundreds of people have lost their houses to storms. Lazaro had always heard the house had no electricity or means to acquire it. Additional cottages with electricity are 200 meters down the road, and many larger Cuban rural houses have generators. Someone stole the woodwork, tile, and bathroom suite from its 3 bedrooms, living room, dining room, kitchen, and bathroom. Recent renovations left half-finished plastering, as if someone began, then stopped. Despite years of neglect, it seems strong and dry. According to farmer Lazaro Abreu across the expressway, Juan El Colorao died at an ancient age. All succeeding residents left. "Fear makes people see things," says Lazaro. "In 48 years of walking these areas in the morning, I've never felt anything strange. Even my house protects me from storms." Neither did old Juan seem worried about the spirits under the roof. "I remember that he would go out to play dominoes and come back all the same at 1 or 3 in the morning," Lazaro says. "I know these things have happened, but Juan was never terrified, so maybe he heard them and slept." Lazaro Hospital. San Lazaro Hospital was in Havana, Cuba. It was the headquarters for several cottages near the Caleta de Juan Guillén, originally known as Caleta de San Lazaro, approximately a mile outside the city walls in the 17th century. The hospital priest, Presbyter Juan Pérez de Silva, and Dr. Francisco Teneza, petitioned King Philip V of Spain for aid with the leprosy patient's plight. In 1781, the Real Hospital de San Lazaro was established on Juan Guillén Cove. The 2-story chapel within became a pilgrimage site for leprosy patients and followers of Babalu Aye, seeking spiritual comfort. San Lazaro Hospital, located on Calle Aramburu, between Jovellar and San Lazaro. The hospital, Espada Cemetery, San Dionisio Mental Facility, and La Casa de Beneficencia y Maternidad de La Habana were all near the Caleta de Juan Guillén, which was filled in during the 1901 Malecón construction. San Lázaro Quarry, where José Martí was imprisoned in 1870, located west of Calle Príncipe. Former La Casa de Beneficencia is now Hermanos Ameijeras Hospital. The site now includes Centro Habana's Cayo Hueso Consejo Popular, ward, the Callejón de Hamel, Fragua Marciana Museum, and Parque de los Mártires Universitarios, are among the cultural highlights of this working-class Afro-Cuban area. Barrio San Lázaro included Cayo Hueso, which was bordered by Calle Infanta to the west, Zanja to the south, Belascoine to the east, and the Gulf of Mexico to the north. On July 26, 1912, Cayo Hueso became a neighborhood, and in 1963, Centro Habana was established. The lepers were moved to Mariel Lazaretto Hospital on December 26, 1916. The patients left their prior home after getting a promise to be moved to Rincon when the new leprosarium was finished. They were joined by priest Apolinar Lopez and Daughters of Charity Religious as evidence. During Rincon's construction, the patients were moved to Mariel and placed in Spanish government barracks for immigrants and military, without the basic human needs. Rincon, a boyeros village, is 25 miles from Havana and near Santiago de Las Vegas. The locality's borders include Bejucal, San Antonio de los Baños, Huajay, and Bauta, once part of Havana province until April 2011. Rincón is one of the major religious pilgrimages, and every December 17th, Cubans visit the leper colony chapel. On February 26, 1917, carts, plates, and wooden ambulances, driven by horses or oxen, transported patients to Rincón's half-built hospital, distant from the city and without resources to treat them. After the long journey from Mariel, the patients arrived in Rincón to find a bitter reality: a few unfinished pavilions in a muddy field, no running water or electricity, no streets, no nursing, and no religious accommodations. Priest Apolinar Lopez and Superior Mother Sister Ramona Idoate worked hard and sacrificed to condition the location, relying on devotee contributions and alms. Eventually, leprosy families came for medical treatment, and patients from other clinics that had been shuttered to concentrate the high number of lepers. By law of July 31, 1917, 30 million pesos were authorized in loan bonds, but the leprosarium still relied on public contributions and believers. San Felipe del Morro, often known as El Morro, the promontory, is a huge fortification and citadel in Old San Juan, Puerto Rico. In 1539, King Charles I of Spain ordered the construction of a fortified tower in honor of King Philip II, who expanded it into a hornwork fort by 1595. El Morro evolved over 200 years, mainly under King Charles III, to its final shape in 1787. The six-story building on a steep, rocky headland promontory on San Juan Islet guards the entrance to San Juan Bay, Old San Juan's port, 140 feet from the Atlantic beach and 18 to 25 feet thick. Forts, such El Morro, La Fortaleza, San Cristobal, El Cañuelo, and others inside the walls of Old San Juan, safeguarded Puerto Rico, also known as La Llave de las Indias. When La Fortaleza was unsuitable, Gonzalo Fernández de Oviedo y Valdés advised building a battery on the Morro, a rocky point. This battery included a tower with 4 embrasures and a 3-gun water battery at the slope's base. In 1555, Morro possessed 8 bronze cannons to defend against French privateers. El Morro, Castillo de San Felipe, withstood multiple foreign invasions during the Spanish rule of the island. Puerto Rico's San Felipe del Morro, fortress's original garrison, was Portuguese troops dispatched from Lisbon by Philip II in 1593. Some brought their spouses, while others married Puerto Rican women, creating numerous Portuguese-named Puerto Rican families. The Battle of San Juan in 1595 saw Sir Francis Drake's fleet unsuccessfully assault San Juan. The English struck again in 1598 under George Clifford, 3rd Earl of Cumberland. Clifford won because he assaulted San Juan on land rather than via the bay. A dysentery outbreak compelled him to leave the island following the Battle of San Juan. Following George Clifford's overland assault, Boudewijn Hendriks's Dutch invaded the island in 1625. The inhabitants were amazed when the attackers passed the castle's defenses and entered the port, out of reach of the city's artillery. El Morro resisted the siege and forced the Dutch to retreat, although the assailants sacked and burned the city before departing the Battle of San Juan. British General Ralph Abercrombie and Admiral Henry Harvey attacked Puerto Rico in 1797 with 13,000 soldiers. Captain General Don Ramon de Castro's soldiers drove back the onslaught. The Battle of San Juan defeated Abercrombie and Harvey. El Morro's final engagement was a U.S. Navy bombardment during the 1898 Spanish-American War, concluding traditional Caribbean naval warfare. The castle was assaulted at least 3 times by American naval troops during the Spanish-American War, the biggest being the bombardment of San Juan on May 12, 1898. In the Treaty of Paris, Spain relinquished Puerto Rico, Cuba, Guam, and the Philippines to the U.S., ending the war. Fort Brooke, a significant U.S. Army installation, including El Morro and other Spanish government buildings in Old San Juan. The U.S. military built baseball fields, hospitals, officers' quarters, an officers' club, and a golf course on the esplanade in front of El Morro in the early 20th century. Teófilo Marxuach was El Morro Fortress Officer of the Day on March 21, 1915. The Hamburg America Line cargo ship Odenwald requested departure without customs collector clearance. She stopped when Lieutenant Marxuach ordered her to fire. The U.S. fired its first combat shot on the day war was declared, during the scuttling of SMS Cormoran off Guam, although Lieutenant Marxuach's bullets are commonly considered the first. In World War II, the U.S. Army built a large concrete bunker on top of El Morro as a harbor defense fire control station to command coastal artillery and monitor for German submarines destroying Caribbean cargo. The highest point of El Morro is a 1906 Euro 8 U.S. Army lighthouse, 180 feet above sea level. In El Morro, flagpoles often display the U.S., Puerto Rican, and Cross of Burgundy flags, a standard used by Spanish soldiers worldwide from 1506 until 1785.